The unexpected victory. The alien forces, known as the Xyrix Empire, had spent years preparing for their conquest of Earth. Their ships filled the skies, darkening the horizon, and their weapons were unlike anything humans had ever seen. With their superior technology and vast numbers, they wiped out human defenses one by one. The battle was brutal, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Xyrix were unstoppable. The human military, though brave, was no match for their advanced technology and tactics. It wasn't just Earth's cities that fell. The very spirit of humanity seemed to crumble. Governments collapsed, nations disbanded, and the survivors scattered. Small pockets of resistance formed in secret, but they were barely a shadow of their former selves. The Xyrix soldiers, confident of their victory, laughed at the thought of a human resurgence. They believed humanity was defeated, crushed under the weight of their invasion. The Xyrix leadership held a massive celebration in their flagship, orbiting Earth. Their generals toasted their success, watching as the humans below surrendered or fled. They had finally done it. They had conquered Earth. The Xyrix Empire now ruled over the planet, and nothing seemed capable of standing in their way. As the celebration continued, a soft sound began to echo through the halls of their ship. It was faint at first, barely audible over the noise of the revelry. It sounded like a drumbeat, slow but steady, as though someone was tapping on the walls of the ship itself. The soldiers ignored it at first, thinking it was a malfunction or some trick of the sound system. But as the minutes passed, the sound grew louder. The high-ranking officials in the room paused. The rhythm was unmistakable. It wasn't just a random noise. It was deliberate. A steady, persistent beat. Someone was out there. But who? The enemy forces had all but wiped out the humans. There was no one left to fight, no one left to make that sound. Or was there? A young officer approached one of the commanders, his face pale. "Sir, we're picking up strange readings from the surface of the planet," he said, his voice trembling slightly. It's hard to explain. The human resistance. We thought they were finished, but there's something happening down there." The commander dismissed him at first. "It's nothing," he said with a wave of his hand. "There's no one left to fight. This is just a distraction. Focus on the celebrations." But the drums grew louder, more insistent, as if echoing in the very bones of the ship. The commander's eyes narrowed. The sound was coming from the surface. It was almost like war drums. But that was impossible. The human forces were scattered, beaten, and broken. The commander shook his head, trying to dismiss the growing unease in his mind. The Xyrix Empire had wiped out humanity's military. They had destroyed every major city. They had hunted down every leader. There was no one left to resist them. So, what was this sound? His mind raced, but before he could speak, a voice from the comm station interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, we've located the source. There's a small human colony hidden in the mountains, deep in the wilderness. It's been there for years, but we didn't know about it until now." A cold shiver ran down the commander's spine. He leaned forward, looking over the officer's shoulder at the data coming in. The colony wasn't large, but it was well hidden. The survivors there had managed to stay off the Xyrix radar all this time. But now, it seemed, they were making their presence known. "The war drums," the commander whispered, his mind connecting the dots. The drums were a message, a warning, a symbol of defiance. The humans weren't finished. They hadn't given up. There was still hope in their hearts. "Send a team down," the commander ordered, his voice tight with tension. "We need to find out what's going on before this becomes a problem." The officer nodded, his hand shaking as he punched in the commands. "Yes, sir. I'll alert the landing parties." As the commander stood by the window, staring down at the earth below, the drums grew louder. A cold realization settled over him. The Xyrix Empire had not defeated humanity. They had only provoked it. The war was far from over. And what the Xyrix hadn't counted on was the power of the human spirit. Even in the face of defeat, humans would rise. They would fight back. The commander gritted his teeth. The drums were a warning, a promise. The humans were still out there, and they were about to make the Exyrix Empire regret their overconfidence. The drums grow louder. The Exyrix commander paced nervously inside the command room, his mind racing with the implications of the sound. The drums echoed like a growing storm, their deep, rhythmic beat shaking the walls of the ship. It was as if the very planet below was calling out, summoning something that Exyrix had not anticipated. The commander, still reeling from the shock of hearing the drums, ordered the search teams to be dispatched to the human colony in the mountains immediately. As the Exyrix ships descended toward the coordinates of the colony, the drums continued, each beat louder than the last. The once faint sound now felt like a constant presence, haunting and unrelenting. The alien soldiers, still confident from their apparent victory, were beginning to feel uneasy. They had been trained for every type of battle, but this was something new, something they couldn't explain. The search parties on the ground moved quickly, scanning the area, but they found nothing at first. The human colony, small as it was, had no visible defenses. There were no signs of activity. No soldiers, no weapons, no resistance. It appeared, on the surface, to be just a peaceful, hidden settlement, completely out of sight from the Exyrix for all these years. However, the sound of the drums grew even louder, now more like a chorus, shaking the very ground beneath the alien forces. As they ventured deeper into the mountains, their scanners began to pick up strange, irregular signals. There was a hidden network here, one that wasn't registered by any of the Exyrix sensors. "We found something," one of the soldiers reported through his comlink, excitement mixed with confusion in his voice. "There are tunnels, hidden beneath the ground. It's like they've been living here, underground." The commander, now alarmed, demanded more details. "What do you mean? Where are they?" The soldier hesitated. "I'm not sure, sir, but there's no way they could have built all this without us knowing. This colony, it's much more than we thought." Back on the ship, the commander ordered additional forces to be sent down. As the search teams closed in on the hidden colony, they finally encountered something that made their blood run cold. They were not dealing with the remnants of a broken humanity. No, these were survivors, resilient, clever, and prepared for anything. The drums beat louder and louder, now unmistakably a call to arms. The humans were ready, and the Exyrix were no longer certain that their victory was a guarantee. As the search parties explored the tunnels, they came across old war relics, weapons forged from scraps of technology, and strange symbols etched into the walls. These humans had not been idle. They had been planning, organizing, and preparing for the day when they would rise up once more. The humans had learned, adapted, and evolved in the silence of their hidden sanctuaries. The Exyrix soldiers, once confident and powerful, were beginning to understand the depth of their mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, its ability to endure. The drums were not just a sound. They were a symbol, a declaration that the war was far from over. The human colony, which had once seemed like a small, insignificant group of survivors, now appeared to be a well-organized force with a singular goal: to take back Earth. The Exyrix Empire, having underestimated humanity's resilience, now found itself facing a threat it couldn't easily crush. The commander's hands tightened into fists as he stared at the footage streaming in from the surface. He had thought that the battle was won. He had believed the humans were broken. But now, with the war drums echoing in the distance and a new force rising from the shadows, he realized that the Exyrix were not the victors. The war drums were a warning, and they were growing louder. The fight for Earth was just beginning. The last stand. The Exyrix commander stood in his war room, staring at the holographic map that displayed Earth below. The drums had not stopped. If anything, they seemed to intensify as time passed. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping over him. The humans, who he had thought were all but wiped out, had found a way to survive, to thrive even. The hidden colony, now discovered, was only the beginning. As the Xyrix soldiers on the ground continued to search the area, they encountered more surprises. The humans, though small in number, had set up defensive positions throughout the mountains. There were traps, camouflaged strongholds, and warning systems that only someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain could have laid out. These weren't the random remnants of a broken species. These were survivors, with a purpose and a fire that refused to go out. The first full force of the humans appeared as a small, well-trained unit, emerging from the shadows of the dense forest and rocky cliffs. They moved with a precision that immediately caught the Xyrix forces off guard. These humans were armed with weapons scavenged from the wreckage of the earlier battles, crude but deadly. The first confrontation was swift, with the human forces ambushing a group of Xyrix soldiers who had strayed too far from their main force. The aliens, though advanced, found themselves struggling to adapt to the unexpected guerrilla tactics employed by the humans. "Commander, they're everywhere," one of the Xyrix soldiers shouted through his comms. The sound of blaster fire and the crackle of static filled the airwaves as the battle escalated. The Xyrix forces, once in control, were now being pushed back, their superiority in numbers and firepower meaningless against the strategic brilliance of the human survivors. Back on the Xyrix flagship, the commander watched as his forces faltered. His soldiers, more accustomed to overwhelming force, were not prepared for the hit-and-run tactics the humans were employing. The drums continued to echo in his mind, growing louder, reminding him of the humans' relentless will to survive. The commander knew he had to take action before the situation spiraled out of control. He ordered reinforcements to land, sending his best soldiers to crush the human resistance once and for all. But even as the orders were given, the commander couldn't help but wonder if it was already too late. The humans had learned much from their defeat. They had studied their enemy, adapted their tactics, and now they were using every advantage the land offered them. The Xyrix were used to fighting in open spaces, with superior technology on their side. But the humans knew the terrain, the mountains, and the forests. They had fought through hardship and adversity, and it made them fierce. The Xyrix soldiers, though strong and well-equipped, had no answer to the determination that burned in the hearts of the humans. The human survivors, led by a veteran named Captain Adrian, rallied their forces around the war drums. Adrian, a former soldier who had witnessed the devastation of Earth, now led his people with a purpose that went beyond survival. The drums had become a rallying cry, uniting the scattered remnants of humanity. With each beat, they were reminded of who they were, what they stood for, and that they would never give up. "Today, we fight not just for our survival," Captain Adrian told his people, his voice strong despite the odds. "We fight for our children, for our future. We fight because we have something the Xyrix will never understand: our spirit. We are not broken. We are not beaten. And we will never be conquered." The human forces, armed with whatever weapons they could scavenge or craft, took to the battlefield with renewed resolve. They used the environment to their advantage, setting traps for the Xyrix soldiers, hitting them when they least expected it, and disappearing into the forests before the enemy could retaliate. The drums, now echoing through the mountains, became the pulse of the human resistance. They were a warning, a sign that humanity was far from defeated. As the Xyrix forces pushed forward, they were met with fierce resistance at every turn. The humans fought with a desperation and unity that the Xyrix could not understand. The drums never stopped, growing louder with each victory, each clash between the two forces. And with every beat, the Xyrix were reminded that the humans were not a conquered species. They had been pushed to the edge, but they had not fallen. Their spirit, like the sound of the drums, could not be silenced. The return of the human spirit. As the battle raged on, the Xyrix forces began to realize just how deep the human spirit ran. At first, they had dismissed the resistance as a final desperate gasp from a broken species. But as they faced wave after wave of human soldiers, fighters who refused to surrender, who fought with the fury of the last surviving warriors, the aliens started to doubt their victory. The drums echoed through the mountains, a constant, rhythmic reminder that the fight was far from over. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now the very ground beneath them seemed to pulse with defiance. The Xyrix commanders tried to adjust their strategies, sending in more troops, more advanced weaponry, and even attempting to cut off the human supply lines. But every time they thought they had gained an advantage, the humans adapted, evolving their tactics to stay one step ahead. The human fighters, once scattered and broken, had become a unified force. They knew that their survival depended on their ability to work together, to combine their knowledge of the land with their raw determination. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back, reclaiming what was once theirs. And with each victory, no matter how small, the enemy's grip on Earth loosened. Captain Adrian watched as his people fought valiantly, their spirits burning brighter with each passing hour. The war drums, once a symbol of fear and uncertainty, now became a call to action. The sound that had once been faint, almost imperceptible, had grown into a force of its own, driving humanity forward. The commander of the Xyrix forces, who had been so sure of his empire's victory just days before, now found himself on the defensive. His once confident soldiers were becoming restless, unsure of the outcome. The human forces had rallied around the war drums, and they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to take back their world. With the war drums as their guide, the humans began pushing the Xyrix back, reclaiming key positions across the planet. The mountains, which had once been a sanctuary for the alien invaders, now became the battleground for humanity's resurgence. The humans, led by their indomitable spirit and their resourcefulness, fought with a strength that no one, not even the Xyrix, could have predicted. Adrian's voice echoed across the radio as he rallied his troops for another assault. "We have fought for this moment. We have been pushed to the edge, and we've been told we were finished. But today, we show them what it means to be human. We'd fight not just for our survival, but for the survival of our children, our families, and our future." They thought they had us beaten, but they were wrong. We will rise, and we will take back our world. As his words rippled through the ranks of the human resistance, a renewed sense of purpose filled the air. The humans, who had once been scattered and fragmented, now fought as one. They were not the last remnants of a doomed species. They were the living proof of humanity's resilience. The Xyrix, still reeling from their initial shock, were now faced with a new enemy, a united human force that refused to bow to them. They had been caught off guard by the suddenness and intensity of the human counteroffensive, and now they were struggling to hold their ground. With every victory, the humans pushed the Xyrix further back. The once proud empire, so confident in its power, began to lose its foothold on Earth. The war drums grew louder, each beat a declaration that humanity was not defeated, not broken, but stronger than ever before. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming a world that had been taken, about proving to the invaders that humanity would never give up, never surrender. The humans had been pushed to the brink, but their spirit, their will to survive, had only grown stronger. The Xyrix were about to learn that underestimating humanity would be their greatest mistake. The war drums were not just a call to battle. They were a symbol of humanity's strength, and the enemy would soon understand that they had awakened a force they could not control. The battle for survival. The war drums continued to beat, now louder than ever. The Xyrix forces, stretched thin and growing desperate, scrambled to respond to the human resistance. They had been caught off guard, underestimating humanity's ability to recover, regroup, and strike back. The once imposing empire now found itself engaged in a battle it had never expected, fighting not just for victory, but for survival. Captain Adrian, leading the charge, watched as his forces moved with deadly precision. The drums, ever present, had become the heartbeat of the human resistance. The sound filled the air with purpose, driving the soldiers to fight harder, to dig deeper, and to hold their ground no matter the cost. The humans were no longer just a scattered group of survivors. They were an army, and their cause was clear. "Push forward," Captain Adrian shouted as he led a squad through a narrow mountain pass. "We take back what's ours, no matter what it costs. Every step we take is a step closer to victory." The soldiers, fueled by the belief that they could win, moved as one. Their determination was evident in every step, every action. They set traps, sabotaged enemy vehicles, and struck at the heart of the Xyrix supply lines. They knew that they couldn't match the Xyrix in sheer numbers, but they could outsmart them, using the environment to their advantage. The Xyrix, on the other hand, were running out of options. The alien invaders had relied on their superior technology, their overwhelming numbers, and their calculated strategies to crush their enemies. But they had failed to account for one thing: the unbreakable human spirit. The longer the war dragged on, the more it became clear to the Xyrix that they were losing not just a battle, but the war itself. Reports of skirmishes spread across the Xyrix ranks. What had once been a controlled, methodical invasion had turned into a chaotic, full-scale rebellion. The alien forces struggled to maintain their hold on key positions as the humans, emboldened by each small victory, fought with a fury they had never seen before. The war drums served as a constant reminder of the strength and unity that the humans had found in their darkest hour. In the heart of the battle, a group of human fighters led by Captain Adrian managed to infiltrate one of the Xyrix's most important outposts. The outpost had been the central command for a vast region, and its fall would send a clear message to the alien forces. Humanity was taking back control. Adrian and his team moved quickly, using the cover of darkness and their intimate knowledge of the terrain to silently eliminate the guards at the gates. Once inside, they planted explosives and sabotaged the communication systems, cutting off the Xyrix's ability to coordinate their forces. The explosion that rocked the outpost echoed across the mountains, a victory that was felt by every human fighter on the front lines. The drums seemed to amplify in response, a sound that carried across the battlefield, signaling that the tide was turning in humanity's favor. As the humans advanced, they found more allies, hidden pockets of survivors who had been waiting for this moment. These survivors, many of them farmers, engineers, and civilians, had been quietly preparing for the day when they could rise up. And now, with the war drums as their rallying cry, they joined the resistance, swelling the ranks of the human army. The Xyrix, now fully aware that their grip on Earth was slipping, tried to mount a counteroffensive. They sent in their elite soldiers, equipped with the latest in advanced weaponry, hoping to push the humans back and reassert their dominance. But the humans had adapted. They knew the Xyrix better than the aliens had ever known them. They had studied their tactics, learned from their mistakes, and now they were ready. In one decisive battle, the human resistance ambushed the Xyrix elite soldiers in a canyon, cutting off their escape routes. The Xyrix forces, though technologically superior, were trapped. The humans fought with everything they had, using the landscape to their advantage. With their guerrilla tactics and relentless spirit, they overwhelmed the Xyrix soldiers, pushing them into a retreat. For the first time since the invasion began, the Xyrix forces realized that they were not invincible. They were no longer the unstoppable empire they had once been. And it was all because of the humans, their resilience, their unity, and their refusal to be defeated. As the Xyrix began to retreat, the war drums echoed louder than ever. The sound of victory was now unmistakable. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for their world, their future, and their place in the universe. The battle for Earth had entered a new phase, and the Xyrix, now facing a force they could no longer underestimate, were beginning to realize that their time was running out. The turning point. The Xyrix Empire, once confident of their ultimate triumph, now found themselves facing a battle they could not win. Despite their overwhelming technological advantage, they were losing ground to the human resistance. The war drums, once just a distant sound, had become a symbol of the humans' resurgence. The once faint rhythm now reverberated through the battlefield, shaking the very air around the alien forces. It was a sound of defiance, of unity, of hope. It was a sound that haunted the Xyrix commanders and reminded them of the mistake they had made. The humans were no longer just survivors. They had become a force to be reckoned with. With every victory, their ranks grew. The people of Earth, who had once been divided and scattered, were now united by the belief that they could take back their world. The Xyrix forces, however, were struggling to adapt. The longer the battle raged on, the more evident it became that humanity's resilience was a weapon in itself. The enemy's once flawless tactics no longer seemed to work, and their advanced technology was no longer the advantage it had once been. Captain Adrian and his forces pressed forward, determined to capitalize on the momentum they had gained. The previous victories had shown them that they could push the Xyrix back if they stayed united. The human resistance now controlled key territories that had once been under the full control of the Xyrix Empire. This shift in the tide of the war sent ripples of uncertainty through the alien command. With every strike, every ambush, the humans chipped away at the Xyrix Empire's confidence. The enemy, once sure of their invincibility, now faced a new reality. They were not invulnerable. The Xyrix Empire had underestimated humanity's will to survive. They had expected the humans to crumble under their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Instead, they had sparked something far more dangerous, a renewed human spirit that would not be silenced. The turning point came when the human forces launched a decisive strike at one of the Xyrix Empire's most strategic strongholds. It was a well-guarded command center, located deep within the heart of an enemy-occupied city. The Xyrix believed it to be impenetrable, a place where their leadership could operate without fear of retaliation. But they were wrong. Captain Adrian knew that this would be their chance to deal a devastating blow to the Xyrix Empire. He and his team infiltrated the city under the cover of darkness, moving swiftly through the streets as the war drums sounded in the distance, urging them on. The enemy had grown complacent, confident that their hold on Earth was secure. But now, they would see that humanity had only just begun to fight back. The infiltration team breached the command center, bypassing the advanced security systems with their own homemade tech and ingenuity. As they entered the heart of the building, the humans encountered fierce resistance from Xyrix guards, but the humans' guerrilla tactics, combined with their raw determination, allowed them to gain the upper hand. Each move was calculated, each step fueled by the desire to reclaim their home. With their primary objective in sight, Captain Adrian issued the order. Take out the command center. We hit them where it hurts. The explosion that followed shook the city to its core. The command center was obliterated, and the Xyrix forces were thrown into chaos. The blast was not just physical, it was psychological. The humans had struck at the heart of the enemy's operations, and they had done it with precision and bravery. The drums, louder than ever, rang out across the battlefield, a symbol of humanity's strength and resilience. In the wake of the attack, the Xyrix leadership scrambled to regroup, but the damage had been done. The morale of their soldiers plummeted as the realization set in. The humans were no longer a defeated, broken race. They were fighters willing to sacrifice everything to take back their world. The Xyrix forces, now disoriented and shaken, began to retreat in some areas. It was clear that the humans had found their rhythm, and the enemy could no longer maintain control. The war drums, once a symbol of resistance, had now become the sound of victory. The humans were not just surviving. They were reclaiming their future, one battle at a time. Captain Adrian stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as his forces pushed forward. The drums continued to beat, but now they carried a new meaning. They were no longer just a warning to the enemy. They were a declaration of triumph. Humanity was rising, and the Xyrix Empire, for the first time since the invasion began, had reason to fear. The turning point had come, and the humans, against all odds, were winning. The war was far from over, but the Xyrix now knew that they were not the unstoppable force they had once believed themselves to be. They had awakened something in humanity that could not be crushed, and the cost of that mistake would soon become clear. The final victory. The war had raged on for months, each battle pushing humanity closer to the edge of annihilation, and yet, with every passing day, the human resistance grew stronger. What had started as a mere whisper, those mysterious war drums, had become a deafening roar, echoing through every corner of Earth. The Xyrix Empire, once so confident in their superiority, now faced an opponent they could not break. Captain Adrian stood with his forces, watching the final battle unfold before him. The war drums were louder than ever, the rhythmic pulse now shaking the very foundations of the Xyrix stronghold. The alien forces were retreating, their once pristine military infrastructure crumbling beneath the weight of human ingenuity and unyielding willpower. The humans had fought not just for survival, but for the future of their world. The Xyrix, battered and weary, had underestimated humanity from the start. They thought that after one devastating defeat, the humans would be broken, that their spirit would fade. But instead, the humans had rallied, using the most powerful weapon they possessed, hope. They had come together, from all walks of life, united in the face of extinction. Their will to survive had forged them into an unstoppable force. The final assault on the Xyrix flagship was underway. Human forces, having taken key strategic positions across the planet, now gathered their remaining strength for the ultimate strike. Their path had been hard-earned, but they had come too far to stop now. Every soldier, every fighter, was filled with a singular purpose: to take back their world. With the war drums as their guiding call, the human forces stormed the Xyrix shipyard, the heart of the alien invasion. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of blaster fire, the clash of alien technology against human resilience. The Xyrix soldiers, though armed with advanced weaponry, could not stand against the tide of humanity's fury. The humans fought not just for victory, but for every life that had been lost, every friend and family member who had fallen before them. In the midst of the battle, Captain Adrian and his elite squad infiltrated the core of the Xyrix flagship. They fought their way through the ship's heavily guarded corridors, a brutal and unrelenting push toward the heart of the enemy's command center. The Xyrix, once confident in their invincibility, were now scattered and broken, struggling to maintain control. The humans had taken back Earth, and they would not allow the enemy to reclaim it. As Adrian and his team reached the core, they planted the final explosive charges, their mission clear: destroy the Xyrix flagship and ensure the invaders would never return. The countdown began, and the human forces quickly retreated, knowing that the blast would be enough to cripple the alien fleet for good. The war drums, now deafening, rang out one final time. The sound carried across the battlefield and through the corridors of the Xyrix flagship, reaching the ears of every soldier, every commander, every alien who thought they had conquered humanity. The drums were a signal, not just of victory, but of the undeniable truth: Earth belonged to its people. The explosion rocked the flagship, a blast that shook the heavens themselves. The Xyrix forces, thrown into disarray, found themselves unable to recover. The flagship was destroyed, and with it, the heart of the Xyrix Empire's invasion. The human forces, battered but unbroken, had dealt the final blow to the alien invaders. The victory was not just a military one. It was a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit. The war drums that had once symbolized the enemy's overconfidence now symbolized humanity's triumph. The sound echoed across the planet, a reminder to every living soul that the Xyrix Empire had been defeated. Earth had been reclaimed. As the dust settled, and the final remnants of the Xyrix forces retreated, the humans stood victorious. They had fought, bled, and sacrificed everything to save their world, and they had won. The drums continued to echo, louder than ever, as the people of Earth gathered to rebuild, united by their shared experience, and determined to never forget the price of their victory. The Xyrix Empire, once a looming shadow over Earth, had been shattered, and in its place stood the indomitable will of humanity, a will that could never be broken, no matter the odds. The war drums were not just a symbol of survival, they were a declaration that humanity had risen, and no force in the universe could ever take that away.